Hi, thanks for having us. My name is Bob Knight, and for the last 90 days or so, I have been an envoy, I suppose, for the mayor, between the mayor and the Bicentennial Committee to try to come to some conclusions on how to get the first Florida Capitol built. I'm very pleased to say that it is going to be built, and I have an announcement tonight. I want to thank Frank for getting me involved in this. Frank is the visionary behind this and has a close ear to the mayor. And I have been trying to stay out of their way. I want to say some nice things about the mayor.
Is that on? Everybody here okay? Okay.
I want to say a couple of nice things about the mayor, so if you happen to see him in the next couple of days, make sure you said I said some nice things. But I've known the mayor since he was in high school, and I've never seen him more focused and more committed when he talks about this. The question for the last 6 months is not whether it's going to be built or whether he is interested in building it. The question has always been how. I can't tell you how many boxes he's had to check. The last time I spoke about this to any of you who might have heard me was a month ago, almost exactly a month ago, when we were at the bicentennial meeting for the History Task Force. And he spoke, and it was a major announcement, and I thought that was the start. Here we go. And I expected him 2 days later to make a public announcement at the City Commission meeting, but for several reasons, he couldn't do that. My compliment to him is that he's moving very cautiously, but very surely. And in the last month, it has given, because we didn't make that announcement on the 17th of December, or whatever it was, 13th of December, it has given him and us the opportunity to figure out a few more things. Particularly funding sources for the city, a major, and there are multiple sources in budget issues. Also, we've had to work through some procurement issues about how to choose a designer and a contractor, much more complicated than I thought. I've learned a whole lot. And even some zoning issues and even definitions like what is a permanent structure, on and on and on, you can imagine. I think he has in his mind a clear path, and all of those obstacles that he told us about in November have been accomplished. And I think he feels very good about the path forward. I want to say that it is going to get built. There are some things that are already in motion. The Parks Department has been very supportive, and there will be a major announcement from the mayor's office at the City Commission meeting on the 17th. That's next Wednesday. And if you would like to come, we certainly would love to have you there. I'm sure he'll be very proud of this announcement, and it is essentially his vision for how to get the first First Florida Capitol built. It will be built as an exhibit, not a permanent structure. It will go away eventually, but it will be in Cascade Park, and all of that will be announced then. It will also be an artist interpretation. In other words, no one's trying to create an exact replica of what it looked like because no one ever saw it. Which is very handy when you're talking about procurement. And so we invite you all to come on the 17th and enjoy this announcement. And I want to say one more thing. I am laser focused on getting it built. That's what I was asked to help do. But there are two parts of this. One is getting it built, and the other one is exercising the exhibition. And I have to tell you that we're going to need lots of help and lots of volunteers once it does get built. We know the general timeline will be that we will acquire the property, this plot in Cascade Park in late April. We probably will not break ground until towards the end of May, towards the end of Memorial Day. It will be constructed during the summer, and we hope to open it when schools open in late August. And we intend to keep it up for some 7 or 8 months until, and there is a date, March 3rd, at which time it has to go away somewhere. So the question is, where does it go? And no one knows the answer to that, but there's lots of nominations. Frank, I want to give you the chance to say whatever you want to say, and I just want to say again, please come on the 17th. We are going to build the first Florida Capitol cabin, and it will be built next summer. And I want to thank Frank again for letting me be a part of it. Frank?
Just to add 2 more points to what Bob had mentioned, for the meeting next week at the City Commission, the meeting starts at 3, and we believe this item would be more at the beginning of the meeting as opposed to the end. So, for folks that can come, definitely come towards the beginning, which is 3 p.m. next Wednesday. Secondarily, the 2 major dates for bicentennial is, pardon me because I'm tired and don't remember the exact dates, but we got March when Governor Duval proclaimed Tallahassee as the capital, and then we have November, I think it's around the 10th, when the first legislature, the 3rd session of the legislature was the first held in Tallahassee, and that's in November. And certainly the project, the first Florida Capitol, will be ready by then, and that'll be certainly major celebrations around that. So happy that we all collectively are going to work on this in some capacity. And it's going to be a great project, and continuation of the legacy from 1924 when a replica was erected. So this is not a replica; it's an artistic interpretation. So, anyways, but it's a pleasure. Thank you all for being here tonight, and for folks that came earlier today. This is the first of many celebrations throughout the year. Thank you.
I saw a hand up over there a while back. Does anybody have any questions?
Oh, I was just gonna say I have a backyard, if you need somewhere to put it out.
We may be delivering it to you. Sir.
Bob, I just want to be sure that everybody is aware that the official Tallahassee Historical Society logo is the log cabin.
Okay. Anything else? Thank you so much. Thanks, Bob.
Thank you all. Yeah, Doug sort of took the words out of my mouth when all of this talk about the log cabin started. Really before COVID, I sort of questioned how important is it to do this, and it really sort of dawned on me that this tiny little, log structure had really come to symbolize in a lot of ways early Tallahassee and this whole sort of frontier situation that was here. And so it's symbolic, and I think it's important, and I'm pleased that it's going to get done. So, having said that, I'm not quite sure how to do this introduction, except to say that Jacquelyn Perkins in particular comes from good stock. Her parents were very important civil rights leaders in this community. I mean, as you all know, they changed the name of the street over at FAMU, I guess last year, was it a couple of years ago, to honor them. And this is an important legacy. The civil rights legacy of Tallahassee is as important as any historical legacy that we have. It just is. And so I'm not going to take up too much time, but that's you. And Delaitre, as you all may remember, a couple of years ago, Delaitre Hollinger took on FAMU. There's no other way to put it. I mean, he came and talked to us. He took on FAMU in an attempt to try to save some of the historic buildings over there. And it wasn't too long after that Doug, again, got in touch with me and said, have you heard about this thing called the Virtual Civil Rights Museum? And I said, no. And he said, well, I've got sort of an early preview of it and so forth, and it's quite amazing. And I've seen a little bit of it, and it is quite amazing. And so the idea of creating a virtual museum in preparation, we hope, for a brick and mortar museum is really quite unique, at least as far as I know. And so I wanted them both to come tonight and talk to us about it and show us about it and give us a tour of it. And so having said that, I'm going to turn this over to Delaitre and Jacquelyn.
Thank you, Bob, and I want to thank everybody for being here. Can you all hear me? Thank you for that introduction, and I want to say to everyone, my name is Jacquelyn Perkins. I'm the co-executive director of the Florida Civil Rights Museum. Those people who know me know that brevity is not a strong suit, but I'm going to be brief tonight. And Bob, I do need to say that I'm here because of Delaitre. Thank you. My parents were people whose their work and their courageous actions resulted in transformational change. I met Delaitre, and I'm not going to go into a lot of the detail because our interview is on the website, but I'm here because of him. I'm here because this is a young man who was anointed and appointed by God to do what he's doing. I have to tell a story really quickly that Delaitre's mother, and I like Dr. Seuss, she didn't read Dr. Seuss to him. When he was an infant and when he was a toddler, she read stories to him about individuals who were courageous. Some of them were African American, some of them were not. But she understood the importance of him knowing about history. And the other thing I want to say is that this is the historical, Tallahassee Historical Society. We are members, and what I do want to know, or what I do want to say is that a lot of times people think that only people with PhDs in history can be historians. That's not true. And my brother was one of those people that had a PhD in history, and he did go back and trace our family history to 1752. But that doesn't mean that someone else who doesn't have a PhD is not a historian. I know that this man understands the importance of reading, researching, processing information, storing it, and retrieving it, on demand. And he's one of the few people that I know that can do that. So he is an individual who had this vision since 2013, and I do want to say that not only has he filed a lawsuit against FAMU, he's been fighting for many, many years. And Delaitre actually went to the county commission when he was 14 or 15 years old to talk with them about naming buildings, renaming buildings. He grew up in a neighborhood where there was an unnamed park, and what he also saw was that there were buildings and parks that were not named for people who looked like him. And at age 14, he went to the county commission. And the park that's in his neighborhood was renamed for an African-American woman who was instrumental in education. So I do want you all to know that. And yes, we're here together. I'm here because of him. I'm going to know that in the interest of time, because we want to show and share a lot of information. I do need to read one thing before I sit down. And again, we thank you for being here. The Florida Civil Rights Museum was established to display, protect, and preserve the stories and legacies that exist to illuminate the history of civil rights and education pioneers in the state of Florida, regardless of race, color, or creed. Now that's what we pride ourselves on, because what we're doing is telling the full story, the true story, for all those individuals who are part of the transformational change in the area of civil rights education and even business. So that's important to us. And again, I'm going to say we thank you for being here. We've got a lot of information to share. I did want to say that we launched the Florida Civil Rights Museum on September the 14th, and we honored 30 people of all races, creeds, and colors. And so there were people who were thinking, oh, well, there's some people who don't look like you. There are other people. Yes, because they were part of the story. They were part of the acting. They actually were courageous enough to effect change that benefited all of us in the state of Florida and in the city of Tallahassee. So thank you again for allowing us to be here, and I'd like Delaitre to stand, for him to come up, and then we're going to immediately go ahead and get into the presentation. So, thank you.
Good evening, everyone. We are proud members of the Tallahassee Historical Society, and Bob, I'm gonna hold you to that publication. I want mine. I want my Appalachia book. Okay. So, what was that? What did you say? The 12th?
Our next meeting is, I think, February the 8th.
February 8th. Okay, I'm gonna come to your house before then. I'm gonna get my. Absolutely. So, but again, I'm Delaitre Jordan Hollinger. I'm also a fifth generation Tallahassean. And it is an honor and a pleasure for Ms. Jacquelyn Perkins, my co-executive director, myself, to be here with you on this evening. Now, when I came here earlier, this wireless mouse was acting kind of funky. So I'm gonna see if I'm gonna see if it's working tonight, and if it is, then you'll see my beautiful face, and if not, I'll be in the back. So let's see if we can get to our site. Go ahead.
How about that?
Okay.
Yeah, we got it.
Okay. I wanted to ask, how many people have actually been to our website? Okay, so, good. So y'all are gonna see what you've seen before, but most people did not raise their hands. So y'all are in for a treat. As Ms. Perkins stated before I get started, this was conceptualized in 2013. During that time, I was trying to figure out, I think I was like 18 or 19 years old. I was trying to figure out how I could save the Firestone building in Cascades Park because of that building's connection as the old jail and its connection to the civil rights movement in the city of Tallahassee. And so that was about a 4-year deal. I had conversations with many people, commissioners, Congress people, U.S. senators, about how we could really commemorate that site as the civil rights site that it is. And so out of that came the idea for a statewide focused civil rights museum. And it's important to note that the students from FAMU and FSU who were jailed at the Firestone building were the first in the whole country to go to jail and opt not to pay their fines. So they talk about the sit-ins in Greensboro at North Carolina A&T State University, but it's important to note that FAMU and FSU students were the only ones who didn't get bailed out. They opted not to, quote unquote, pay for segregation. So out of that battle came the Florida Civil Rights Museum. And so this is our homepage. And this has been a labor of love for Ms. Perkins and I. This kind of gives you a brief overview. Have a little video playing in the background there, but you all get to see that in real time. Ms. Perkins, what do we call this young lady?
We don't have a name for it.
We don't name. She's our spinning woman. So she is the symbol for the Florida Civil Rights Museum. And the title of this exhibition is They Made a Difference. So you'll see 5 different galleries. You'll see one gallery for males. You'll see one gallery for women. You'll see one gallery for, you'll see 3 galleries for power couples. And it's They Made a Difference.
And can I say one thing?
Yes,
We
please.
had a woman because we were initially going to get this started doing women's history.
So Ms. Perkins said that the spinning woman is there because we were initially going to unveil the museum during Women's History Month. But as the Lord would have it, September was the month, which is actually our birth month, so it worked out. So these are just a few pioneers. You'll also see these people who you should be very familiar with, this room at least, on the front of our brochure. And please, on your way out, we have plenty of brochures, donation cards, as well as the program from our launch event on September 14th. So please feel free to take those items. And this gives us a little bit of history and a little bit of our partners. All right. So, see, oh, I had already opened these. All right. So, but before we go here, I'm just going to give y'all a brief look at what you see when you click on women, Part 1 women. So you actually see the photographs of the people who are being recognized. And again, we had the opportunity to recognize these 30 individuals on September 14th. So this is what you get initially when you click on the individual. And then when you click on the picture, you actually get an opportunity to read a lot more about that person. And so this is something that you would not get an opportunity to see in a normal museum. Because it's virtual, we get a chance to have a lot more about the person on this site. All right, so I need to be able to see. So, all right. So this is our first gallery, and I'm going to come over. Okay. All right. I'll be in the back.
Not working?
It's not the way I need it to.
Oh,
I brought another wireless mouse, but I guess
yeah, okay.
we'll just.
If anybody wonders what this is about, April and many people who work with the state have told me that the state's Wi-Fi system is frequently not up to snuff. And don't ask me why, but apparently that's the case. Well, I didn't say that.
Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Bob, were you finished?
I am finished.
Okay.
All yours.
All right. Do you all hear any feedback, or can you hear me just fine?
It's fine.
Okay. So we'll start our exhibit with Anita Davis. Unfortunately, I don't have time to go into everybody's history tonight, but Mrs. Davis was the first African-American woman to serve on the Leon County Board of County Commissioners. Her civil rights involvement before that time included service as president of the Tallahassee branch of the NAACP. She filed a lawsuit in 1983 against the county because there were the county commissioners at that time. There were 5 seats, each elected at large. And so it was a body that did not have much diversity, and no person of color served until she filed that lawsuit, and successfully the courts ruled in her favor in 1986, which is when Dr. Henry Lewis was elected to the county as the first African American. And that's how we went from 5 at-large seats to 7 seats, 2 at-large, 5 from single-member districts. Miss Nancy Russell served as principal of Leonard Weston Elementary School on the south side of Tallahassee. And the significant thing about the Florida Civil Rights Museum is that we recognize civil rights leaders as well as significant and pioneering educators. And Ms. Russell was just that.
Delaitre, I'm sorry, because we're informal. Can you?
Carrie Pittman Meek was a United States Congresswoman. She was born and raised here in the city of Tallahassee. One thing I think is quite significant is that, what's the issue?
She's got a statement.
I have a question. I would like for you to, if you wouldn't mind, going back to Anita Davis, so you can see, they can see the drop down and see how much information is in there.
Okay, we'll do it. Say again?
If you could go back to Anita Davis,
Mhm.
Commissioner Davis, do the drop down so they can see how much information is in there.
Sure.
Yes. Which you wouldn't find in a museum, a brick and mortar museum.
I know I got 30 minutes, but here we go.
This is the only way you're gonna do that. That's when she was sworn in.
And this is 1993. And that's Clerk Lang on the left. I'm embarrassed him right quick. That is Clerk Lang swearing in Mrs. Davis to become the first African American female board chair for the county, 1993.
Just want to show that one example so you can see how much.
Was that it, Ms. Perkins?
Yes, we just want to show that one example so people can see how comprehensive the information is.
Okay.
Thank you, sorry.
Okay, Congresswoman Carrie Pittman Meek. As many of you may be familiar, the city of Tallahassee recently renamed South Bruno Street in honor of Congresswoman Meek. South Bruno Street from Palmer Avenue on FAMU's campus to FAMU Way. And they renamed that section of Bruno because she actually was born and raised there. Her parents operated a boarding house. When she was a little girl, about 12 years old, as a Girl Scout, because she was black, she was not allowed into the Florida Capitol along with her counterparts to sell Girl Scout cookies. And so that, even though she lived in the shadow of the Capitol and was born and raised here, that experience really informed what she would do with the rest of her life, eventually becoming the first black person from Florida to be elected to the United States Congress. And we should always be proud of her and claim her as a Tallahassean. Dr. Doris Alston was the first African-American person to serve on the Leon County School Board. Appointed by Governor Askew in 1975, she was elected in 1976 in an election where she defeated her opponent soundly, James Harbin. And that particular election in September of 76, the voting population of blacks at that time was only about 15%. Dr. Melvine Hardy, you might be familiar with the Hardy Center for Women at Florida State, which is now the Hardy Center for Ethical Leadership in Higher Education. At FSU, Dr. Hardy was a women's leader, if you will. She was also a civil rights activist and was responsible for many of the first African-American administrators who were hired at Florida State. Dr. Ann Richardson Gale Spelton, who Julie Montanaro actually joined Ms. Perkins and I at the facility where she is. I can't think of the name of it now. Westminster Oaks, I think. And she's the only living person that is in our inaugural exhibit. And she's 100 years of age. And she taught in the FAMU College of Education for 50 years. Mrs. Mamie Strong was the founder of the Strong and Jones Funeral Home, which began in 1947. She was very instrumental in the civil rights movement, contributing her time, financial resources, cars, and also gas vouchers for that movement. A significant reason why we recognize Mrs. Strong is that many times African Americans were not afforded dignity in life, and so funeral homes like Strong and Jones allowed them the opportunity to be afforded that dignity in death. Our second room here. Start with Ms. Lucille Williams. Ms. Lucille Williams was the principal of Bond Elementary School from 1973 to 1981. She was instrumental in many significant changes and improvements in the Bond community, and that included the construction of the Smith-Williams Service Center, which was named in her honor, as well as the first library on the south side of Tallahassee, which before the B.L. Perry branch was built on South Adams Street, the Bond Branch Library was actually in Smith-Williams Service Center. So much more than just a school principal, she wanted to make sure that her students and what was around them were things that were constructive and positive for her community. Miss Margaret Leonard, the first Southern white student to go to jail for voting rights. She was also a freedom rider. She worked for many years for the Tallahassee Democrat as a reporter, was very, very proud of her involvement with civil rights. And she actually spent time in Parchment Prison for her voting rights advocacy, which is, of course, one of the most notorious prisons in the country. But we certainly wanted to recognize her for her sacrifices We had a chance to talk to a few of her family members who weren't able to make it to the ceremony, but we certainly honor her and her accomplishments. Miss Laura Dixie, who is often referred to as the mother of the civil rights movement in Tallahassee. Mrs. Dixie was a member of the NAACP and of the SCLC and a secretary to the Reverend C.K. Steele. She often traveled with him on his many trips to desegregate facilities across the country. And many people don't know that Reverend Steele was not just a homebody. He was very much a national leader in the civil rights movement. And so she often traveled with him. When Dr. King came to Tallahassee, he would stay with Laura Dixie because, of course, during that time there were no hotels generally that served African Americans. There was one or two, and then the rest were boarding houses. Let's see.
Her husband also.
About Dr. King staying with Mrs. Dixie, he did attempt to integrate the Tallahassee Motor Lodge Motel, where he was arrested for attempting to do so. That was 1964. Miss E. Lillian Spencer, who was also a principal of Bond Elementary School, Mrs. Spencer was a pioneer in our community. If you're familiar with the South Side, there's a park, the Speed Spencer Stevens Park, and she's one of the namesakes of that. Miss Spencer became principal of Bond in 1941. She was the principal, she was the athletic director, she was the women's basketball coach, she was the men's basketball coach, she was the lunchroom lady, and all of that good stuff. At that time, Bond was a wooden school, and as you can see, she's here with both the male basketball team and the girls basketball team. And this picture was taken in 1945. And this is Miss Alice McGlynn, who was one of the teachers. And this is Mrs. Spencer. Very much a pioneer. Before she left, they had constructed the first brick buildings for the school. The school had water connection. And she also gave of her time and talents as a fundraiser and servant in the community as well. Mrs. Dorothy Nash Tooks was the founder of Bond Elementary School. She also opened her home at 412 West Virginia Street, which is on the National Register of Historic Places, as a place for black travelers to stay during segregation. The Tooks Hotel opened in 1948 and operated until the 1970s. In addition to her service as the founder and first principal of Bond School, she also worked at Carter Paramore High School in Gaston County until she retired in 1971. We certainly recognize her as a trailblazer. Many very famous African Americans who visited Tallahassee stayed at the Tooks Hotel, including Duke Ellington, James Brown, Hattie McDaniel, James Baldwin, and many other famous guests. State Representative Gwen Cherry, who graduated from the FAMU College of Law in 1965. She was elected in 1970 as the first African-American woman to serve in the Florida legislature, was very instrumental and active in women's rights as well as civil rights, and championed the ERA. She was the first person of her race and gender to apply for the presidency of the University of Florida, and was responsible for many significant changes for women and minorities, as well as for child care facilities in the state. So that is our first gallery. And now we'll go to a gallery for men in our community. Forgive me if I'm going too fast. Um, So Justice Richard W. Irvin Jr., who was also Florida's Attorney General from the 1940s until 1964, Justice Irvin was instrumental in school desegregation in Florida, became a Justice of the Supreme Court of Florida in 1964, retiring in 1975. Dr. Michael Cascia, who was a Florida State University professor, and he was instrumental in providing bail money for those students who were arrested during those 1960 student protests. And he was also very much an environmental activist for the south side of Tallahassee, where he lived. George Calvin Best Jr., who was a student at Florida A&M University when he was killed in Mississippi in 1967 while attempting to register black voters. He was a Tallahassee native, and in 2022, the City Commission voted to rename Russell Street in his honor, and that happened last year. And he's the only civil rights leader who left Tallahassee, but came back deceased. The Reverend C.K. Steele, who was born in Bluefield, West Virginia in 1914, came to Tallahassee in 1952 to pastor Bethel Missionary Baptist Church, and he immediately got to work with desegregating the Tallahassee police force. And in 1952, Tallahassee got its first black officer, Fred D. Lee. Throughout the 50s and 60s, he was very much involved in the Montgomery bus boycott. Of course, he led the Tallahassee bus boycott, which was started by two FAMU students, Wilhelmina Jakes and Carrie Patterson. He actually joined Reverend Steele on many stops throughout the South, encouraging other African-American pastors to boycott city buses, including in Louisiana and in other southern states. He became the executive vice president of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference in 1957, was instrumental in the voting rights movement, the Chicago movement of 1966 to eradicate slums and segregation there, and then was very much involved in filing numerous lawsuits to desegregate facilities here in Tallahassee. Dr. Charles U. Smith. Dr. Smith is known as a crusader for Florida A&M University, FAMU Way, which used to be Canal Street. He was the primary advocate for FAMU Way. So the FAMU Way that you see now was as a significant result of Dr. Smith and his advocacy and efforts. He was the first black chair of the Lynn County Democratic Party, as well as the first African-American administrator at Florida State, or professor at Florida State University, and taught for many years and served as Dean of Graduate Studies at Florida A&M. Attorney Leonard Pepper. Attorney Pepper passed in 2016 at the age of 102. In the 1940s, he was instrumental in getting legislation passed in the Florida legislature which banned facial coverings. And he did that to, as a result of the terror and violence that was being inflicted by the Ku Klux Klan. So as a result of Attorney Pepper's work, he got that legislation passed in the legislature in the 1940s, and was very much a civil rights lawyer and advocate for many causes. Dr. Charles Evans, who came to Tallahassee in 1982, served as president of the local NAACP for 15 years. Dr. Evans was instrumental in the hiring of the first African-American city manager, police chief, as well as the first black assistant fire chiefs in Tallahassee. Let's see. Dr. Benjamin Perry, who was the president of Florida A&M University from 1968 to 1977. He's significant for his efforts to prevent the merger of Florida A&M University and Florida State universities at a time when doing so was very difficult. And it was a very much a time of upheaval and strife for that community. He took over the presidency shortly after Dr. King was killed. And so he had to face many battles as president, but he is known as the savior of FAMU. The Reverend R.N. Gooden, who came to Tallahassee in 1961 to pastor St. Mary Primitive Baptist Church, Reverend Gooden was instrumental in the Leon County School District hiring its first black administrators at the district level, as well as in many promotions that took place at the Tallahassee Police Department, Leon County Sheriff Office, and in city government as a whole. Rabbi Israel Dressner was one of the Tallahassee 10 who came to Tallahassee at Dr. King's behest in 1961. This is a photograph, actually, of Father David Brooks. This is C.K. Steele Jr. And Rabbi Dressner at the Tallahassee airport. And you see the back of Priscilla Stevens Krause's head here. They were at the airport to test whether or not those facilities were integrated, and Rabbi Dressner, along with 9 other ministers from all over the country, were arrested for that. They originally appealed their convictions, and they returned to Tallahassee 3 years later to serve out their sentence when the conviction was overturned. So this is 1964. And this is them after the arrest. Father David Brooks came to Tallahassee in 1947 to pastor St. Michael and All Angels Episcopal Church. He was the president of the NAACP, Southern Christian Leadership Conference, and the Intercivic Council. He was very much a leader in early efforts to desegregate Tallahassee. Right. So these are our power couples. Bob mentioned Robert and Trudy Perkins earlier, and you'll get a chance to learn more about them. So let's click here. So Bob mentioned that on September 10th, 2021, the city of Tallahassee renamed Gamble Street on the campus of Florida A&M University to Robert and Trudy Perkins Way for 2 individuals who played a critical role in the desegregation of city government in Tallahassee. Mrs. Perkins, Trudy Perkins, had been one of the first black nurses at TMH. And when she discovered that black nurses were being paid less than white nurses, she brought attention to that, and she and her colleague Lizzie Smith Dennis were terminated. Mr. Perkins, even though he had earned his bachelor's degree from FAMU, he was not a lawyer, but he prepared case files for 25 employees of Tallahassee Memorial Hospital. He took this information to Washington, D.C., where he spent his own money and traveled to meet with Senator Birch by Senator Ted Kennedy, as well as the Attorney General of the United States at that time, William Saxby. And the Attorney General agreed with Mr. Perkins that the city of Tallahassee was engaged in a pattern and practice of discrimination. And so a decision was handed down in April of 1975 by Judge William Arnall, federal Judge William Arnall, that the city of Tallahassee had to hire blacks at a ratio of 23.7%, which was the black population in Tallahassee at that time. And so as a result of their actions, the city of Tallahassee's government was desegregated. I should also mention that Mr. Perkins was also instrumental in the city of Tallahassee constructing a park, the first park for African Americans in the 1950s, and that was Jake Gaither Park. And he continued to advocate for recreational facilities throughout the 60s. I thought that article was in here. I do not see it. But can definitely share it later. George and Clifton Lewis. Clifton Van Brunt Lewis was very much a historic preservationist. And she is certainly a hero of mine in the Tallahassee community, founder of the Lemoyne Center. She and her husband were civil rights activists in the Tallahassee community. And Mr. Lewis, as president of the Lewis State Bank, often gave money to Reverend C.K. Steele and other civil rights leaders during that time, assisted in their efforts. He loaned to blacks when no other financial institutions in Tallahassee would do so. And they were mainstays at Tallahassee City Hall and were two very courageous individuals. And last but certainly not least, two of my ancestors, Doc and Carrie Jordan. Let's see. The Jordans actually played a role more so in Jacksonville than in the city of Tallahassee. But as the Florida Civil Rights Museum, I'll speak briefly about their accomplishments. Professor Jordan challenged President Woodrow Wilson in 1917, and he lived to tell about it. He challenged his segregationist policies following the East St. Louis race riots. He founded the Department of History at North Carolina Central University. He was the president of Edward Waters College in Jacksonville, as well as Kittrell College in Kittrell, North Carolina, and was a colleague of W.E.B. Du Bois. They both attempted to prevent the Georgia legislature from closing 1/2 to 2/3 of black public schools at the turn of the century in 1901. And he continued to speak out for justice at a time when many of his colleagues who looked like him were afraid to do so. And Carrie Thomas Jordan, who was a Jacksonville, Florida native, went on to become a gene supervisor, which at that time was a term for the superintendents of black schools. The black schools were not funded to the level of white schools, so for many years into the 1960s, there were genes teachers, and their salaries were funded by private philanthropists, including Julius Rosenwald. And as a result of her efforts, 12 new schools were constructed for African Americans in Durham County in North Carolina within a 3-year time period. So if there are any questions, we are more than happy to answer them. Thank you for indulging us. This concludes my presentation.
And let me say that I did not want to, I wanted to say to Bob when he talked about coming from good stock, as you can see, Delaitre's uncle, great-great-uncle and great-great-aunt, his great-great-uncle challenged and wrote a letter to his sitting president in 1917, accused him of racism and the race riots that took place, and he lived. He didn't get lynched. And then the other thing, he started the history department, and for what, 20-some years, he was the only history professor. So in addition to his mother reading him, not reading The Cat in the Hat and all of that, he had family members. Those are his ancestors. His great-great-uncle received 2 degrees from Ivy League schools in the 30s, an Ivy League school. And I'm sorry, that was what? Columbia University. Got a master's degree in the 30s. In the 20s, I'm sorry. That's almost unbelievable. And his great aunt that he just referred to, she actually changed the curriculum for, what they call the colored schools, from farming, sewing, and some of those other things to arithmetic, to making sure that individuals knew how to get up and speak humanities. And those are just a few of the things that they did. And just very recently, they named a street after their parent, after his great-great-uncle and great-great-aunt, a roadway designation that is right in front of the North Carolina Central University. And so when I mentioned that he was anointed and appointed, he also has the DNA to do what he's doing. So just wanted to share that. I didn't want to mess up the presentation because I knew he was going to talk about his aunt and uncle.
If anyone has any questions, we'll be happy to answer.
And let me say this, let me apologize to Delaitre and Jacquelyn. As you all know, every time we have a speaker, we offer them an honorarium, and our honorarium this year is the official Tallahassee Historical Society Bicentennial Travel Mug. And for not the first time, I walked out of my house this evening and forgot them. So when we have the magazines soon, we will also have the travel mugs. So does anybody have any questions? Isn't this an impressive? I mean, imagine doing that. I guess I'll start off. What progress? Is this going to become brick and mortar at some point? Where are we on that?
Well, Ms. Perkins.
We're still praying. And because we've had so many comments and compliments, because it is cool, everybody can access this. We're now having to make some decisions about how we want this to be what I call an ancillary learning center, especially for our youth. And that's where we are. We don't have any funding, and we are doing what we're doing on a shoestring budget. We had 2 people that asked us, well, gee, did it cost $1 million to do what y'all did? No, but we did it because we used what we had. And I do need to make a comment about the Dr. Ann Gales. We can show it, or we can send it to you all, Bob, the video where we went out to go take her medallion, and we showed her how to use she's 100 years old. And like I said, Julie Montanero followed us out there, And she was very, very thrilled about it.
And she navigated the site, so it's beautiful to watch. It's beautiful to watch.
Will you be giving this presentation again?
I'm happy to give it to anyone who requests. But
Will you share with us any of the historical facts that you gleaned?
oh, absolutely.
It's on the, you just didn't show all of it. Every one of those photographs, we were just trying to do this in a compressed period of time. All of the items and the photographs and everything are on it. And what we are planning to do
Do
as
you
well.
own all that? Do you own all the pictures? Like if we wanted to glean the picture, could we use it, or where would we get information to get permission?
So when you click on the individual's picture, it gives. Let's go here. I'll give you an example. Now you won't be able to lift it off of the site, but
And all of those are copyrighted.
right.
For those that we have permission to use, those photographs.
So you have to get the copyright permission.
Right.
I got it.
And in our case, photographs that we used were either gotten from the family members, and if they weren't gotten from the family members, then there are other institutions that are credited on the website.
Or those pictures are in the public, they're.
Or they're in the public domain. And the historical facts you're talking about, each person, if you click on the picture, it takes you to their individual web page, and it has significant facts about that individual if you want to read and learn more. Yes, ma'am.
In the picture that you had on the opening shot, it's there on the,
Yes.
what street is that in the background? And also, is the home of Robert and Trudy Perkins still standing?
The home of Robert and Trudy Perkins is indeed still standing, and I'll let Ms. Perkins, and I've been trying to convince her to put it on the. She didn't need no convincing, but I'm going to get it on the National Register and the local register, and I'm going to get a historical marker. That's my goal. This particular picture, this is actually Gaston County. So if you don't recognize the background, I'm coming to you. If you don't recognize the background, this is actually Gaston County. In this particular picture, in this particular picture, you'll see Reverend C.K. Steele, Reverend R.N. Gooden, Father David Brooks. This is the Reverend James Orange. He was an SCLC national spokesperson for the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. And so this particular march was because the voter registration books for citizens in Gaston County were being kept in a private business, and as opposed to the Supervisor of Elections office. And so they marched and they challenged Governor Askew, and as a result of that, they were able to get those books moved to Supervisor of Elections office. So that's the significance of this picture. This is 1971, and this is an image that's available on Florida Memory, but I need to have it colorized.
And Bob did say that we're going to need to wrap up in just a couple minutes. I want to say that as Delaitre was explaining, we just, due to time constraints, we didn't click on every picture so you can see the extensive bios and other photographs. And I do want to recognize, before I forget, our friend and colleague, Priscilla Hawkins, who is with us and who has actually been on this journey with us. He is the president of the
Black History Alliance.
Black History Alliance. And I do want to say two more things. We actually had a young lady who spoke yesterday. We were invited, they asked us to present someone who could speak at the MLK event yesterday. She's 9 years old, she's in the 4th grade. She brought the house down. We've been working on that. She's on the front cover of the WFSU News. She actually got a 2-minute standing ovation. All the judges, all the elected officials, everybody was there. And then she got to do it again in the morning. So we've been working pretty hard on a few things. So she's going to speak in the morning. The school superintendent asked that she come tomorrow and deliver her speech.
Go ahead.
Bob, there was one question.
Go ahead,
Sir.
Well, I know this takes a lot of space. Had you, and I probably can ask you this later, but you had to read the drop down. Had you guys considered doing the, I forgot, like Word does, it automatically reads and speaks out the words, or how would you call it?
I understand exactly what you mean. So basically, when you go to the page, if there will be a voice that'll be reading to you. So yes, we are working on that with our web developer.
And we're gonna have the next installment within the next, hopefully, 30 to 45 days. So this is our first 30. The county would like us to have about 60 people, and so there will be others that will be added.
We'd like to talk with you all about the historical marker idea for the Perkins. So when you're ready, we would like to talk with you all
She's the
about
property owner.
that. Okay.
Okay.
Let me say a couple of things before we wrap up. One is, as usual, we would like to thank very much April Kirk and her staff here at the mission. This is what a wonderful place this is. And then finally, I'd like to invite everyone back on February the 8th. I think it's February the 8th. To an evening of fun and information, and our speaker is going to be the infamous, the notorious, the incendiary Diane Roberts, speaker, writer, political commentator, and probably most important of all, scholar of Southern culture and literature at Florida State University. And Diane, I interviewed her the other day, and I told Diane that she would draw a big crowd, and I think she will. So thank you all very much for coming tonight, and stick around and talk with Delaitre and Jacquelyn. We will see you in February. Thank you very much. And the magazines will be ready.